Hey everyone, this video I'll be going through the things I worked on in the last 3 or so weeks. The majority of the time went towards the grabbable objects, but I've already put out a video specifically for that one, so I only briefly show that and talk about it. But some of the other stuff I worked on in this time being around the entity pathfinding, which is really basic at the moment, and I'll talk about it a bit more in that segment, and the new HUD UI, so equipping items to the HUD slots, and even with the new weapons stuff, so weapons only being fireable if you have them in that inventory HUD slot and have them highlighted, and then new reload mechanics for that, and then some additional stuff I've worked on, which I'll go through all throughout this video. Now, one of the things with the grabbable objects I wanted to talk about is this new can object. This one, it's the first real item that's going to be in the game. And as you see, it's got the world object, which is the 3D model. That's pretty much done. It's, my attempt in Blender to make very basic model, and the texture is applied to it. And in the inventory, it has an image, the small 1x1 cell image, which also is used in that new HUD UI element there. And then you have, for now, in the that bigger image up the top, that's the texture I made for the model, and I've just put it there for now. And then there's a bit of a description there too. So this is close to being the first item actually completed. So now with the entities, one of the first things I did, this was probably 3 weeks ago, was the entity death, its true death, and some blood pools. Now, with the entities you can shoot them, and being the rat being the only one at the moment, unfortunately the rat has to take it all. But it's got now a death state, which is the state you can see there, where it just has a dead body kind of state, and then the blood pool spreads out. And then later on it has, if you destroy that body, that's the true death, which kills the body completely. Another thing I would show with the death states is I've added a Resurrect Cheat, which is just going to bring back any entities that have been put in the death state. Another thing I've worked on with the entities is this go-to very basic pathfinding, and it's just go to this position, and at the moment I've set that to be go to player if its health is above 50%, and then if it's less than 50%, it goes away from the player. Now this is just the placeholder until I start working on the pathfinding, the actual pathfinding. I'm gonna try and do A star, but I haven't ever done that before. I know of it, and I want to get something like that set up. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, especially the collision grid. I was going to use that, but I've set that to be quite large at the moment, so it's not really beneficial to the pathfinding just yet. So that I'll need to figure all that out. And the other thing I want to mention is with this go-to player, if you notice the entity, when it's following the player, it's either looking slightly to the left or slightly to the right. It's never looking directly at the player until the player's at a bit of a distance. So that's another thing I have to still fix, and just wanted to point that one out. And also with the entities, if you notice, when they're colliding with objects now, they're colliding properly, they don't get stuck. So I fixed the collision detection for the entities. And this is the code here that I've set up for that go-to position. There's even look at there. So this is pretty simple, just the entity's aim direction, which aim direction I set up for, if you haven't seen the previous videos with the entities are simply a screen that's always facing the player. So the screen is see-through, and the texture of that screen is dependent on the position of the player relative to the screen's aim direction. So that same aim direction I'm using to get this go-to position. So when it's go-to position, let's say how I've used it, which is the position of the player, the aim direction is always going to be, always should be facing the player. But at the moment it's not. That's why you're seeing that slightly left and right. So part of it I have to fix. And then there's just an additional Y component, which is if it's flying versus if it's not, then there's no Y component to its vector, its velocity. And then look at is simply just changing the aim direction of the model. The next thing I want to talk about is the new HUD inventory there at the bottom. So now you have these 10 slots you can assign items to. Now, as you see here, when I've clicked equip item, it assigns it to that slot. And then if you switch and try and assign it to multiple positions in that HUD, then you can't. So you can only assign it one item to each slot there. Now, there's also that 4 highlighted borders, which shows the current active position. And then so in the case of this gun here, if you have that position highlighted, then that's your current active gun and you can fire the weapon. But if it's something else, you won't be able to fire the weapon. Now, also with that means, there was a bunch of functionality changes that needed to happen to get all this to work. And then if you noticed how that position changes, there's 2 ways that you can go about it. One is to use the quick slots, which is, as you see in the inventory here, or you can use the mouse wheel. You just scroll up and down. And I've also added the invert HUD scroll, because maybe some people prefer scroll down moves the inventory up, scroll up moves the inventory down. So I've added that as an option. Now to demo that gun functionality a bit. And as you see here in the inventory, when you scroll, you see I've added in the bottom right there just a simple test gun, which is the the other thing added to the guns or items is this HUD world, and that is how the item looks when you're holding it. So for the gun, I've just added just this test object for now, or test image for now, but something like that needs to, when you're firing, it needs to have a firing animation. When you're reloading, there needs to be a reloading animation. But yeah, for the cans, I'm pretty happy with. Like, that's almost everything done for the can object now, for the can item. You've got how it looks in the HUD inventory cell at the bottom there. You've got how it looks in the inventory, and you've got that detail image. You've got how it looks in the world, and now finally how it looks when you've got it in your current HUD active. So another thing you'll see a demo, just sliding the FOV doesn't change that image. So that image is just set to your 2D screen space, not like how the world view is there. It's an actual 3D view of the world compared to the HUD being this 2D screen space. So what I'm planning probably to do with, let's say, the gun is, if I get the model to animate, let's say, from the actual angle I want of it firing bullets or reloading, and then what I'll do is then convert that to, I'm using the sprite sheet effect to kind of animate. It works like a GIF. It's just a sequence of images that it cycles through to make it look like it's doing something. So, and in the game so far, you'll see it when you're firing at the enemies, or I think that's the only place actually, but when there's the blood splatter effect, that's a 2D sprite sheet effect, which makes it look like it's splattering out. So the guns probably will work the same way. But yeah, that's to prevent the HUD from having any sort of 3D type stuff needed. So the HUD works as 2D, and a lot of the old games used to do it this way. I think a lot of newer games don't do that anymore. They persist the player and anything they're holding as a 3D object, especially if they have a third person view. Then the whole player is a 3D model as well. So yeah, that's just that extra HUD stuff I've worked on with some additional demo there. Now with the guns, I wanted to talk about the code architecture a bit. Code architecture's never been something I've been good at, and even throughout working on this game, I've kind of redesigned things, changed how everything linked together, and I've had to do so with this creating of the HUD because there was new conditions I needed to think about, and then with the current architecture it didn't work too well. So this is how it is currently. Now you'll notice there's these managers like screen manager, item manager, gun manager, and the menu manager. So these aren't the only managers type objects I have in the game. I use them a lot throughout different functionality, but specific to the guns, we can focus on these four. Now, the managers work a bit differently to classes because they're persistent throughout the game, versus, let's say, the level, which is a class, it gets created or unloaded depending on the state the game's in. So on the main menu, you won't have a level, but if you say enter new game, then the class is created. But things like the screen manager and the item manager, they're usually booted once or loaded once, and then used throughout the gameplay. So if we look here to the left, we have the player, and that player has an equipped gun. So, and players linked under the screen manager. So the screen manager will create the player, the level objects. But if we're looking at the player has an equipped gun. Now, the equipped gun is, for most parts, null unless you have the inventory slot in the HUD as the current active position with its gun not null. So that's that outer edge link there from player equipped gun to inventory HUD slot position current items gun on the right there. So this is kind of what I've had to set up, and it's not perfect, but it's working for now. So when current items.gun in the inventory menu is set, then it sets the player.equipped gun to equal that gun. Now that is two sections that the gun needs to exist in. There's also in level, you have the level world items gun, and that's the world item gun. Now that's the 3D model, and for now it's that box model that you see in the world. So the way they interact with the, let's say, the current items.gun is if it's in the world, it's not existing in your inventory. But if you pick up that world item gun, it then removes it from the world and adds it to your inventory. And then it's the same in the opposite way if you drop it. So if you drop the current items gun, then it removes it from your inventory and adds it to the world item gun. Now this specific gun, in whatever state it's in, it needs to persist its, let's say, the amount of current ammo it has. So like you've held it in your inventory, fired 15 shots, and then dropped it. Now when you pick it up again and equip it, you should have 15 bullets still in the gun. And so things like that need to be handled. But to talk about now, if we look at level objects, which I have put initially sets gun. So this is where the gun first gets created. So when you load the level through Screen Manager, the item and gun manager create the item, and then item manager will create the item that will exist in as world item, and then gun manager, you use gun manager to assign that gun or create a new type of the specific gun that you've defined in gun manager, and then that creates it. So level objects creates it in the world for you to then pick up and add to your inventory. So I hope this helps a bit with how I've kind of gone about it. It's not like, there's probably way better ways to handle this stuff, but I've kind of gone about it like this. So just to show in visual how everything interacts, like menu manager, which have inventory menu, you've got the new inventory HUD, which has the 10 inventory slots, and then how the gun gets assigned to the inventory slot. So this just a visual of that code architecture. So to talk about the code a bit, this is the gun manager. So in the gun manager, other than the instancing of the gun manager, we have any guns that get defined. So at the top there we see this gun 01. It just creates a new gun, and the gun being a class, and in that class you can assign whatever you want for now, and this keeps growing anyway, and I know there'll be more I need to add to the gun class, but for now I've got things like the sound it will make when you fire it, the reload sound, the time it takes to reload, the bullet velocity and type, the damage, and things like that. So this is just a kind of a skeleton for the game to use when it creates a new gun object. So if you see at the bottom there, we've got this new gun. So this method is used, let's say, by in level object when we want to create a new gun. So we just use an instance of that gun one, let's say, or later with the game development, there'll be hundreds of different guns that you can define there. So this is just the gun manager. So like the gun manager, there's also the item manager, and this is an example of creating the new item. So everything basically is derived from the item. So item could be having a gun, or item could be something like the can. So those items need to have, where you see there, world objects, small cube, that's the 3D model of that item. And then you have the dimensions, you have new button, image file path, gun 1, which is how it would look, let's say, in the inventory, the grid. And then you have how it looks in the HUD. So that could be different depending on the item. And then there's also the detail, which is that 600 by 429 image. So yeah, this is kind of how I've created the items. And then you've got extra, the vector 2 that you see there, vector 2, 2, 1. That's the amount of slots it'll take up in your inventory. And you've got a simple description, gun 1, which is when you're looking at the item in the world, and then that this is a test gun is the item's description. So this is one example. So this code segment here is how the items get added to the world, and this gets run once. So this is where it gets initially created in the world. When, let's say, we load in the level, it then creates all the objects that level needs, like walls or interactables, or even, these items. And what that first line is, because everything starts as a world item, which is what I was meaning to say in that last segment. So we have world items, which then have items, which is the object in the inventory, and then those items could have a gun. So I initially had started with trying to set the item's item type, but that didn't work too well with having so many different type of guns. So for now, it's kind of like, you start with a world item, which is that 3D object, and then that 3D object has itself an item, which is what you'll see when it exists in your inventory, and then that item could have a gun. So let's say for the can, that item.gun will be null. So, but then for any guns, which is that second line, we have item.setGun, which then sets the item.gun to something, which is that instance of gun manager there, which creates the new gun of type gun 01. And then, textures is what you'll see in the inventory. So this is what I mean by code architecture, and how, it may not be the best approach, but it's working for now. And the last thing I wanted to show in the gun code is this change HUD functionality. So this gets fired when you either change the resolution of the game or maybe equip the item. So if you see here, if the HUD slot is equal to the current HUD active, then I'm setting the player equipped gun to be that current item's gun. So this is how you see when you're hovering over the specific gun, you can fire, but if you're hovering over something else, you won't be able to fire it, which is the else equipped gun is null. And then if you've got no items in your inventory, your equipped gun is null as well. And that's it for this video. I've tried as well to do a bit differently with the editing of this video. I've recorded the videos and the audio separately this time, and trying to add more effects and things so I can improve on the video creating as well. But yeah, thanks for watching everyone. That's it.